Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining Loud and Agile Network June session. Speaker for tonight is Bhavani Krishnan. I have worked with her before, like we did SPC training together, and I have great praise for her. She kind of helped us in our certification itself, like getting ready and groomed. So Bhavani, she holds tons of certification, ranging from Scaled Agile to IC Agile and Cal certification, Cal E, Cal O, name it, and she has it, like Kanban, and she's coming with wealth of knowledge. And she has experience as an enterprise agile coach working for great organizations at Care First, Blue Cross, at Capital One, at Psych, and various places supporting uh, large scale agile transformation. So, here today we have her today as a guest speaker. She will be talking about agile prioritization and, most importantly, the power to say no. So, with that, I'll hand over to Bhavani. It's all yours, Bhavani.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and welcome. I don't think that I could have done a better job. Maybe I need to write down what you said. Please help me with that later on. All right. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. And I appreciate you all being here because I know it's a beautiful day, at least in Virginia. It's in the 80s. And I know my husband and my kids are all walking outside, and it's just so pretty. So, I truly appreciate you being here. As Anju mentioned, I am an Agile transformation coach, and I have 19 plus years of experience with Agile in various roles. I live with my husband and two boys. Um, my firstborn, you see here, he works for Fannie Mae, and my second one is a rising high schooler. I love to travel. Some places that have been really mesmerizing, whether it is international, national, and I love to be with nature. And I am adventurous in a way where I love hiking and like really learning more about how to thrive with nature and respecting it. I'm also a big Harry Potter fan. So every year, September, last week of September, we change our house to, Great Hall, and it becomes Hogwarts, and it's just fun. And I recently celebrated my 25 years of marriage with my husband, my best friend, my mentor, my lifeline, my all. So again, I'm just super excited to be here, and I'm thrilled you are here. And my hope is that whether you are a Scrum Master, a product leader, or Agile coach, I'm hoping that you leave with practical ways to reclaim focus and deliver real value. So, with that said, let's break the ice with a little honesty. Drop in the chat your answer to what's your funniest or most harmless Agile confession? And there's no judgment, it's only for laughs. Let's see what you've got. Just something along the lines. I can maybe share one to get you all started. I remember one of the team members, it was actually an architect, and he said, "Hey, I called a spike just so I could figure out how Jira works." This was like, they were migrating from another tool to Jira. So he was like, "I called a spike just so I could figure out how it works." I'm really bad at saying no. Well, you're in the right place. Anything else? Come on, no moment of vulnerability here. Okay. All right, so before we dive in, let's talk about one of the most powerful tools in Agile. It's not a new framework. It's not AI, the buzzing AI. It's not sticky notes. It's the word no. And yes, that tiny two-letter word that can cause awkward silences in meetings and bruised egos and raised eyebrows from stakeholders, right? So, today we are going to cover why saying no isn't just acceptable in Agile, it is essential. And how no can actually protect your teams from burnout, from context switching, and those untimely emails titled "quick thing," but is never quick, right? And why skipping no often means saying goodbye to focus, quality, and sanity, and how to use data to make your no sound less rebellion and more like responsible leadership. It's less about defiance and more about strategy. And we'll also look at how to turn no into not now and a gentler way to say, your priorities are not my priorities right now, right? It's a diplomatic way to say, I hear you, but we're not doing that yet. And most importantly, how to help your teams to say no without jeopardizing their job or losing their cool or adding more stress, and how to help them say no without losing momentum, trust, or sleep. Yes, no equals responsible leadership. Absolutely. All right. So, first off, ooh, didn't mean to move a slide. Um, so first off, the in Agile, no is not negative. It's powerful. It's focus. It's clarity, and it's delivery. But let's be real. No is and Agile is not about saying no to everything, right? And becoming the team of naysayers. It's about mastering the art of balance, knowing when to say yes to opportunity and when to say no to protect your team's capacity and protecting quality and protecting their sanity. That's the important thing, right? And most of us thrive on pleasing others and being agreeable. I'm like that. But in reality, when we say yes to everything, we're just inviting more chaos. And at that point, prioritization becomes more of a guesswork and focus gets fuzzy. And suddenly we're juggling multiple things at once, right? And there is a cost to all of that, and it is super expensive. So, no is how we bring back the balance, and it is how we stop reacting and start responding. It is how we make room for more meaningful work instead of being buried in busy work. Now, it's not about being rigid, it's about being intentional, about choosing clarity over clutter, delivery over distraction, and progress over being overwhelmed. So, like if you think about your last PI or sprint, did you say yes to something that you should have said no to? I mean, we've all been there, right? And what happened? Did it knock something more valuable off the plate? Did it stretch your team thin? Did your well-crafted plan get tossed out the window by day two? And we've all been there, right? And that's why learning to say no gracefully, confidently, but with purpose is not just a skill. It's a leadership muscle. Like Meenakshi said, responsible leadership is, the way to say no. It's knowing to say no. And it's how we create the balance agile teams need to thrive. So, no equals effective prioritization, and you need the courage to say no. And we talk a lot about delivering maximum value, right? But somewhere along the way, many of us confused value with just say yes to everything, especially managers that are representing the teams but are answerable to leadership and also to stakeholders. And I empathize with them. And the uncomfortable truth is effective prioritization often means having the courage to say no, not because we're lazy, not because we're mean, but no because we actually want to deliver what matters, right? Now, let's break it down with something we all understand pizza. I know it's over 7 p.m., and some of us are probably hungry, but go with me here. Imagine your backlog is a pizza. You've got only so many slices, and every request is a topping. If you try to honor every ask, pepperoni and pineapple and pickle and anchovies, extra cheese. You just keep going on and on and on. You don't get a better pizza. You get a very weird and soggy disaster that nobody wants to eat, and it's just a sheet of dough, right? So saying no is how you protect the pizza. It's how you curate the most delicious, valuable slices instead of ending up with a backlog of chaos topped with regret and hot sauce. And I acknowledge saying no is hard. I know that, especially when that request is coming from somebody up way high and, who is just, ends every sentence with, "Hey, it's just a quick thing," or maybe it's just a 2 point, thing, and it's just easy. The hood is open. Why not just add it to that? But leaders who can say no kindly, clearly, and with purpose set the tone for focus, right? They protect the team from distraction and steer the ship toward outcomes, but and not obligations. I recently had a chance to work with a product owner who absolutely nailed the art of graceful no. It was they actually implement SAFe, and it was mid PI, and the team was laser focused on delivering a critical feature tied to a high visibility customer milestone. Everybody was in flow, progress was strong, and morale was up. You could almost smell the demo day success. Um, then a stakeholder popped in with that, infamous phrase, right? "Hey, quick ask. Can we just squeeze one more thing? I think it will be simple enough. I've actually done some homework. I've talked to the SMEs and the architects, and they also agree with me." Now, it is true. The ask was simple enough. It was not unreasonable. But the fact was that it was unplanned, it was unprioritized, and completely out of sync with the current objectives that the teams had committed to. And it was one of those, 3 points, 5 points, but simple enough kind of ask that sounds harmless, but often derails the team's focus faster than you could say context switching, right? Now, here's the magic. Instead of panicking and placating and putting her team on a treadmill of burnout, the product owner paused, smiled, and responded calmly. And she said, "I hear you, but adding this will derail our top priority, the MVP that your business owners are expecting." So instead of switching team's focus and risking the possibility of not meeting the commitment, let's explore it together in the next PI, right? She was very calm. She used simple language, clear, firm, no drama, no defensiveness, and she backed it up with data. And guess what? The stakeholder did not storm off. He did not escalate it. He nodded. And why? Because she acknowledged the request, and she explained the trade off, and she offered a path forward. And she's demonstrated that saying no is not rejection, right? It was her way of redirecting the stakeholder with intent. And that one moment, that was the moment that set the tone for the rest of the PI. The team was super happy. They felt protected. They were like, well, the things that we talked about in the last retrospective was actually followed up on in action in front of them, right? And the priority stayed intact. The feature got delivered on time, and the stakeholder brought back the quick ask to the next PI planning. And this time it was actually aligned and it was ready to go. So that is leadership, right? Not in like the loud textures marching around with, a whiteboard kind of way, but more of a calm, a confident, and priority protecting way that builds trust and delivers value. So she not only built trust with the team, but she also built trust with the stakeholder because they got what they were promised, right? And yes, they wanted more, but they just needed to be redirected with, more focus. So again, Next time your backlog starts looking like build your own topping buffet, ask yourself, is this topping worth adding, or are we about to ruin the whole pie? So, no protects and maintains focus, right? I know I am continuing to say this in different way, but saying no is not about being difficult. It's about being deliberate. And every task that comes your way feels important. I get that because somebody important asked for it. But the truth is, not everything contributes equally to value delivery. Some requests are mission control critical, and some others are more like nice to have until it derails your sprint, right? So if we don't say no to low priority tasks, our backlog turns more into a junk drawer in the kitchen. You know, the one that, starts out very organized and then suddenly is filled with batteries and rubber bands and chopsticks of every flavor. So saying no is how we Marie Kondo the backlog. We keep what sparks value and politely thank the rest for their interest. Now, let's talk brains. Our brains are wired for focus, right? Not fragmentation. Every quick ask may seem harmless, but it pulls our attention. It creates decision fatigue and adds a whole new round of Slack messages or team messages, depending on what you're using, meetings and mental jugglings, right? The cost is slower delivery. There's more bugs, and that moment, when everybody blinks in the retro, like, wait, what did we do? Why did we take that story? And was it really a 5 point story? And what can we do, better about estimating it, in a better way and being effective at refinement? So all of that comes into picture. And there are newer studies every day, but one thing remains the same. They show that multitasking can drop productivity by 40%, right? Saying no lets you protect or the flow time. So you can go deep and meaningful work instead of shallow and scattered busy work. Now, when we're talking about brain, let's get real about the cognitive load. When our mental to do list starts to feel like a game of Jenga, it's not about working slower, right? We actually start to make more mistakes and typos sneak in, and the test cases get skipped, and that one tiny detail that gets missed, just snowballs into a big thing. And yep, it causes production incident at 4:55 p.m. on a Friday, right? So saying no is like closing the browser tabs in your brain, and you don't need 27 things open. You just need the three that matter and the brain space to do them well. Um, Saying no, keeps the fire from spreading. There's a moment in every team's journey where being helpful quietly turns into being overwhelmed. It starts with a simple, sure, we can take that, and that's followed on by another and another and another until the team board starts looking more like a bingo card than a well planned map, right? And that's not velocity, that's a slow motion pileup. And the saying yes to everything means your team is always sprinting on a treadmill, moving fast and burning energy, but not really getting anywhere. And over time, that pace is not sustainable. That is very dangerous. And, you find yourself in a land of missed deadlines and, defects counts raising. And one thing to keep in mind, I see this even today, where burnout is considered as a badge, right? But it's not. It's a warning light. The warrior spirit does not last for too long. We often confuse busy with valuable, but value comes from focused progress and not frantic juggling. By saying no to the non essentials, teams can create breathing room needed to deliver work that they're actually proud of without resorting to, late nights and emergency deployments. And too much work in progress is like trying to cook 5 meals at once with one stove, right? Something's going to boil over and something's going to be undercooked. And worst of all, you may not really have anything to serve at the end of it. So think of no as a work management tool, not rejection, but more of a reset, right? It keeps our commitments real, our flow stable, and our team energy more human. Because, let's be honest, when people are constantly exhausted, innovation and quality are the first to go, right? They focus more on just delivering and following what the plan said. And agile is not about doing more, it's about doing better with less chaos. So I know that there's a lot of focus and like I keep adding more and more focus into why saying no is important. We will get to the how, but I've seen more and more, product owners and more scrum leaders struggling with this, that this has been near and dear for me. And I've collected some data from the ground where, rushing to close stories at the end of the spring sprint, cutting corners, testing on a Friday afternoon, and hoping nobody finds the bug before Monday is just become the norm now, right? And when teams are stretched too thin, quality quietly sneak out the back door. It's not because people are not trying, it's not because people are not smart. It's because they're trying to do too much. And saying no is how you slow down just enough to build something worth shipping. It's not about being lazy, but it's the opposite. It's about being intentional. The paradox of productivity is less really is more. And when we chase volume, we sacrifice quality, right? When we focus on MVP, the quality shows. So overcommitting leads to bugs that sneak through because testing was rushed, or work that has to be redone in the next iteration, and maybe even features that could technically ship, but nobody could use it because they're confusing or broken or incomplete, right? And we know that customers don't care how many tickets the teams closed. They don't care about the quantity, they care about the quality. They care about how well the thing works when they touch it, right? What's more valuable to your customer? 10 half baked features or three that are actually going to solve their problem, right? So let's stop playing backlog bingo and start building things that last. Um, one more, and we will get to the how part. I know many of us are interested in that. Um, but how does this align with strategic goal? How does saying no, help you align with what actually matters? Agile is not about going fast. I just said that. It's about going in the right direction on purpose. Again, nobody wants to be that team delivering at lightning speed on work that nobody actually asked for, or worse, that it solves the wrong problem. Every time we say yes to something that doesn't align with the strategic goal, it's like launching a dozen features in your app that nobody uses. Well, the one thing the customers are begging for is still in the backlog. And just because it's shipped, it doesn't mean that it's useful, right? So saying no is how we keep the work that we are doing today aligned with the vision we're trying to reach. And strategic alignment is not just good for teams, it's good for business, right? When teams say no to misaligned work, leaders, get clearer visibility into progress on actual business priorities. Customers get features that solve real problems, not just bonus buttons that they may not use now. And users get products that feel coherent and focused and actually work well together. And teams spend less time, thrashing and more time delivering value, right? So again, organizations that align execution to strategy are 72% more likely to outperform their peers on business outcomes. So the bottom line is, when execution is aligned to strategy, everybody wins, right? Teams work smarter, leaders see impact, customers feel heard, the company moves faster and more towards the purpose. So next time when somebody drops a quick request, or when someone is trying to disrupt your PI or your iteration, ask yourself, and maybe even ask them, is this aligned, or is this just noise with good intentions? All right, so we saw the importance of why no, right? Now let's look at the how. I know many of us feel, about how we feel about the spreadsheet. I'm not a fan either, but saying no with spreadsheet is way better than with a shrug, right? We get it. Saying no to a stakeholder who's asking very nicely and also happens to be wearing a VP badge can be nerve-wracking, right? You don't want to seem unhelpful or inflexible or be the naysayer. But guess what? When you've got the data, it's not personal, right? It's just math. And data does not flinch under pressure. When you back up your no with actual metrics like cycle time or WIP limits, or you're using prioritization techniques like way to short a job first, you're not just being that team that pushes back, you're being the team that makes smart trade-offs and protects delivery. So it's the difference between, we just don't have the capacity right now, and our efficiency is, or our flow efficiency is down to 22%, and our cycle times trending up 25% if we add this. And we might even jeopardize the entire release, right? So when you provide that kind of data, the stakeholder is not mad, but they are more impressed, because they are not, but now you're not guessing, but you're navigating with a dashboard. You're providing actual data that helps them make that informed decision, right? And the other thing is, use prioritization frameworks as an armor. When you use clear prioritization model, the no does not land on you anymore, right? It lands on the framework. You remove the bias from it. And think of it as handling the decision over to a neutral referee, right? And it might look like, let's say if you're using a prioritization model from, say, like WSGIF, you would be like, hey, we would love to, but this scores lower on cost of delay. And let's say you're using Moscow, right? Must have, should have, could have, and won't have. Then you're saying, well, we have flagged this as a won't have for now, but it's parked safely on the could list for later. And let's say you're using impact versus effort. Then you're saying, well, this one's in the painful but low value quadrant, and we're not going to, go through that. So we're going to let it go. So you're not dodging responsibility, you're leading with structure, right? And use flow metrics as the team's stress thermometer, right? You know what doesn't lie? Your WIP limits, your cycle time spikes, and a defect rate that's climbing, right? So those are not excuses. They're just early warning signals. And when a team is drowning, flow data tells the truth that stand-ups won't, right? You want to be able to use it to say, we're currently operating with WIP levels that are significantly higher than our sustainable limit. And adding more at this point is not acceleration, it is sabotage, and we will not be able to meet the commitment, right? So that kind of conversation, that kind of language shift helps the leaders and help the stakeholders and business owners to get a clear picture of what it is that they are going to get at the end of, a cycle or an iteration. And last thought before we move, when you bring data, you bring confidence, right? Saying no does not have to be emotional or dramatic or awkward. It can be a calm, confident conversation when you've got the data to back you up. So, again, break your charts, use your frameworks, make friends with metrics, because when no is backed by data, it sounds a lot like leadership, and nobody can deny that. All right, this is my favorite. And when I was just a little tidbit here, when I was trying to, prepare for the lightning talk last year's Safe Summit, I was working on this, and I actually used AI, and I put my headshot picture and I said, make this person look like me, and that's what came up. So I don't know if you all agree with that, whether that person looks like me or not, but that's what AI came up with. But anyways, it is my favorite because we're, reframing no, right? And I recognize no sounds final, but it doesn't have to be. Saying no flat out can feel a little like slamming a door, and nobody wants to be the person who kills hope in a single syllable, right? But the secret is, in high performing teams, you don't have to kill the idea. You just put it on pause, right? What you're really saying is not no forever. You're just deferring to later. So, few things to consider. Number one, acknowledge, don't dismiss. Start by showing that you're listening. People escalate when they feel unheard. And, you can say things like, thanks for bringing this up. I can see it's important to you and the team. And when the other person hears that, okay, yeah, they understand what I'm trying to say. It's not that, I'm bringing the unimportant work to the team. So when you're saying, yes, I understand it's important to you and the team, it lowers the emotional temperature and opens the door for a rational conversation. Number two, that I would recommend is making the trade offs more visible, right? Move from no to if then, right? Help them see the cost of saying yes. Something along the lines of, if we take this on now, here's what will likely happen. And that could be along the lines of, well, we may need to pause or drop X, which is tied to a deadline, an OKR, or something that around a milestone. So and add more along the lines of the team's capacity is already fully committed, so this will either delay delivery or impact quality. So being upfront and transparent helps them see the real picture, and you're making it visible. So again, you're not saying no to their idea, you're saying yes to transparency and responsible planning, right? And another thing is to offer a path forward. Show them you're not throwing their idea in the trash, right? You're parking it with intention. Something along the lines of, hey, let's add it to the backlog and bring it to the next PI or iteration planning. If it aligns with our top priorities, we can give it the focus that it deserves, right? And maybe even like invite them to help with prioritization so they share accountability. Um, One real life story that I can share, and if there's any interest, I can maybe even share the case study. Is one of the major airlines client that I supported recently. They used to have two separate backlogs, one for IT, another for business. But when we implemented some of the techniques and the ways that I'm sharing today, it helped them tremendously that in 4 PIs, I want to say, in 3 to 4 PIs, their predictability went from 66% to somewhere along the lines of they were actually over delivering. Um, so that's a real story, and it further led to them looking at their intake policy and their intake mapping and their business intake processes. And when they went into fixing that, and intentional prioritization, continuous prioritization, and using WSJF at multiple different levels, it kind of opened the door to a possibility where the business and the IT backlog became one. They have one centralized backlog, and technicians that work in the flight they now have direct access to creating requests and requirements and adding to the backlog. Obviously, they all get prioritized. They go through, multiple, levels of prioritization. But all this to say that, what started as us versus them in business versus IT took a turn to, all right, let's sit together, let's work together and work from a centralized backlog. That was the moment of the most satisfaction that I could get from my career so far. So again, just make data your friend and show that and make that visible, make it transparent to them. The other thing I would recommend is ask the question, the most important question. What should we drop to make room for this, right? Because sometimes the best move is to put the pressure back on them, but with kindness, with grace, and but ask them that. That shifts the frame from add to adjust and invites them into the trade of conversation. Because again, even the previous requirements or requests were made by them, right? They are the stakeholders, they are the business owners, they are the one with the backlog. So any backlog now, before, or after comes from them. So put that responsibility on them. And then one more thing is escalate strategically if needed, right? If, and it's reality, sometimes they won't budge. And the genuine ask, sometimes can jeopardize the team's goals. And you may need to involve a higher level prioritization forum like a steering committee or a product management group or whomever makes that decision. And this seems like a strategic shift, right? So tell them that. And let's bring it to the next art sync, or let's bring it to the next meeting where we can talk about prioritization so we can align with other big things. You might have other things in the backlog. I'm using a lot of safe language here, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be framework, agnostic, right? You might have priorities happening at different level. You could have it at the org and the portfolio, program, system, team, whatever level. Bring it to the next big level and help them make that decision. The other thing I will also say is stay calm and stay curious. And, when someone's pushing really hard, it often signals deeper concerns like, fear of missing a deadline or pressure from above or lack of trust in the planning process. So ask them, be curious and genuine, and maybe ask them along the lines of, help me understand what's driving the urgency on this, right? That opens the door to empathy, which is often the fastest path to alignment. So again, it's important to, understand tone plus timing will help you influence, right? There needs to be a rationale. There needs to be an alternative. And this is not about softening the blow, but it's about helping people feel heard while keeping your teams out of chaos. And upgrade your language more, along the lines of, I have a lot of mentors, and one of them is an expert coach. And one thing that they taught me was to reframe the usual panic powered no into a calm, constructive deferral, where instead of saying, no, we can't do that, say something along the lines of, that's a great idea. Let's revisit in the next PI when we can reassess capacity. Or let's explore how this aligns with current objectives. And if it doesn't, we can park it for future consideration. And instead of saying we don't have time, say something along the lines of, we want to give this the attention it deserves, right? And Right now, we are focused on committed priorities, right? It's the shift from passive to professional, right? And the last thing I would say about this is build a not now culture, right? And here's where it gets really powerful. When you say, let's revisit it later, it actually creates a system that makes good on the promise, right? Create a next PI consideration um, section in your roadmap, make that visible so they know that you're just not, like brushing them off. And you want to be able to hold quarterly prioritization reviews to surface any of the deferred items. And maybe even use a lightweight intake process, so no does not mean lost forever. And that shows people you're not dismissing them, you're designing an intentional decision hygiene, right? Um, the other thing also is to help the team normalize saying no as a team, right? Let's make no a team sport. It's like a dodgeball, but emotionally intelligent, right? So, how do you put that into practice? You want to create a team working agreement. Saying it out loud, we commit to limiting WIP and saying no when needed, right? Even if it is, yes, be curious, absolutely. Even when it is your but when it is your manager, especially then. The other thing is practice saying no in your retros. It might sound silly, but it works, right? Practice real life no moments where, you could just role play to say, hey, let's pretend the CEO wants us to deliver 2 quarters of work in one sprint. I know I'm exaggerating, but what do they say? The team should be like, no, but with more grace and be more respectful about it. The third thing, and I think this is the most important one in my experience, is where leaders, model it like they mean it. The product owners, the scrum masters, the delivery leaders, and the business owners. I'm looking at them and I'm asking them to please, please, please practice that. If you're always saying yes, the team will burn out trying to keep up. They show them that no is not a dirty word, right? It's how you protect what matters. And we all talk about psychological safety. We're all very familiar with that. But a psychologically safe team is not afraid to say no, right? They say no to protect focus. And I would invite the leaders to build teams that treat no not as a confrontation, but more as collaboration. It's respectful, it's an informed choice in service of the bigger picture. Now, how do you balance normalize no without letting it become a free pass? Because that's also a concern, right? Especially for managers. They're like, well, teams might just abuse that and we can't take that either, right? But normalizing no is about protecting focus, not dodging responsibility. It does not mean that, we suddenly have a team of polite rebels saying, here's how you strike the balance. You may want to define the why behind the no. Make no a strategic response, not a knee jerk reaction, right? Encourage the teams to say no because we're at WIP limit. No, because this is not aligned with our sprint goals. No for now. Let's revisit in the next planning cycle. And using team agreements as guardrails is the other way too, right? Where you're like, hey, we will protect focus and say no only when needed, but with clarity, respect, and data, backed by data. And leaders still own the North Star, right? Empowered doesn't mean unchecked. So you want to make sure that your product owners are constantly aligning with stakeholders on priorities. And your team facilitators are helping teams balance autonomy with accountability. And you want to track outcomes, not the outputs, or not just the outputs. If the team is saying no more, but delivering higher value work, meeting your iteration goals and avoiding burnout, that is a win, right? That is the data. But if they're saying no without improving outcomes, then it's time to inspect. Are we lacking clarity in goals? Is there misalignment on what done or valuable means? And are we unintentionally shielding the team from critical work? All of that needs to be taken into consideration, right? So look for signs of imbalance, and consistently saying no to leadership is equal to potential resistance. And consistently saying yes to everything is a risk of burnout. So saying no is like salt, right? Powerful in small amounts, but too much will ruin the dish. And we want to strike the balance there. So last slide here, and key takeaway is no is focus, right? No is not closing doors. It's it's only shutting out noise so we can hear what matters. In a world of never-ending asks, we want to be able to use no to help teams stay laser focused on delivering value and highest value work. No is intended to prevent burnout, right? And that's how the intention is to protect their time, their energy, and their mental space. And no should improve quality. When, again, we talked about it in multiple teams, but the no allows space for craftsmanship. It allows space for testing. It allows space for iterating, right? And the no aligns us with purpose. And every no that we say carefully, intentionally, should bring us closer to what our goals are and what our strategic themes are and priorities are. And that's how we prevent detours and keep the teams connected to the bigger picture. And lastly, when no backed by data and empathy, it becomes a super powerful leadership tool, right? The best no is never emotional, and it's informed and human, and it shows that there is empathy and you care. And it becomes a tool for transparency, trust, and strategic prioritization. And there's no defensiveness, right? So just try these, and hopefully these are useful tips, and some of the things that I had shared are implemented, and it gets you to where your teams need to go. And again, these are all tested and tried multiple times, and hopefully this helps you as well. So, what questions do we have? Or if not questions, does that resonate with you? What have you tried? Does anything seem new? Or is this all, things that you have already tried and tested, and this is just reconfirming and reiterating many of those things?
All of the above.
All of the above, yeah.
While we're waiting for additional questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions. This was really good. Yeah, I think at least I'll speak for myself. We definitely tend to succumb to pressure and or say a flat no. And I really saw the value in um, not now, or sure we can do that, but what can we take off from my plate? I mean, I think all of them definitely very, very strong and doable ways of saying no. So thank you for sharing those thoughts. Definitely fresh in mind, and I'm going to start practicing from tonight. I'm not doing the dishes.
Is that supported with data, Toby?
Yes.
Don't miss
That's
the
a joke.
cue.
That is a joke. But I do have a question, Bhavani, while we're waiting for other questions. So when working with stakeholders who are very narcissist, or when there are strong egos and involved, um, I can see how some of the techniques that you mentioned will work, and over a period of time, you will definitely build that trust. But maybe you could walk us through where you've had some really narcissist, very what do they call hippo, the highest paid and the loudest voice in the room. What are some of the techniques that tend to work really well in such situations? You're on mute, Bhavani, I think.
Where did I go on mute? There we go. Yeah, no, great question, Toby. And I'm not saying that just, to agree with you, but it happens to all of us, right? And one of the, thing I will add here is with strategy, professionalism, and a little bit of, psychological, I don't know, akin, it can definitely, you can definitely say no. The first thing I've done in my past is understand the dynamics, right?
Hmm.
Narcissistic stakeholders often crave control and validation, and they tend to see no as rejection or disrespect. And they want to feel important and in charge, right? So your
Yep.
goal is to say no without triggering their ego by, focusing on outcomes and alignments and the options that you can bring to the table, but not refusal.
Hmm.
So the strategies that I have used to say no without, like the blowback, again, we looked at one of that, right? Reframe it as a yes, but. So something along the lines of, hey, that's a great idea. To make it successful, we need to defer X to get more capacity. Which path would you prefer? And helping them understand that capacity is currency. It's not free. You are paying for that
Hmm.
team's capacity, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
what needs to come off? And the reason I think it works is because it keeps their ego intact by validating the idea and giving them the the push back to say, well, you own their capacity, so what would you want to use their capacity for?
Sure. Yeah.
Because you're placing the decision and the trade-off on them, right? um, and you can also kind of show the current data in terms of the team's capacity, like being fully allocated to high priority items was agreed upon in last week's steering committee. Now, adding this would now push back delivery on A and B, right? So again, I'm not the villain here, the data is, right? So
Yeah.
that externalizes the no.
Sure. No, excellent.
So yeah, so few other things that I have tried, but again, you're just like trying to normalize the trade-off conversation is where it
Hmm.
works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being polite, but be firm.
Yeah, assertive. Yeah, thank you. Very good.
Yeah.
Molly, you had your hand up.
Yeah,
Would you
yeah,
like
I
to
think
unmute yourself and speak? Yeah.
yeah, I did. Thank you. One of the things, first off, I want to say that this presentation was great because it really succinctly kind of lays out the strategies and actions that can go along with it. And you've really cut through a whole lot to just to lay it out in a beautiful way and some good reminders. I think that one of the things that I have found useful is working to get to know those stakeholders and be able
Hmm.
to anticipate what their questions are. And I almost make a game of it. And going into any of these discussions, I kind of go over, all right, what are their issues? What are they facing? What questions are they going to ask? And be prepared for any number of different avenues that the conversation might take. And over time, when you know where they're coming from, I think that really helps because you can bring forward options that you can anticipate they will choose. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Molly, that makes
know your
absolute
core.
sense. Yeah, it's more of like building that stakeholder playbook, right? It's like mapping key personalities, like you know, like a sports team, right? Like your CIO is a stakeholder, and they are going to likely ask for quick wins and visibility. And the triggers could be like, you know, they don't like to be surprised or being ignored. And like, what could they value? They would value speed and influence. And what's the
Right.
strategy? It's more of like, show how delays hurt his timeline, right? So yeah, so it's more of like building that playbook. I absolutely 100% agree with that.
And I mean, you can even use that for the work that you have ongoing, because if you know why they're asking this thing, you can potentially show and demonstrate to them why this thing gives them that value that they're looking for in this other ask.
Yeah.
They maybe don't see it that way. So
Yeah,
it's sort of like leading the witness. Anyway,
absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. Toby, I know it's 8 o'clock. I just want to maybe answer one question if Mark is still there. I see a question about, do you have any resources for determining WIP across projects in an organization, not just a single effort? Yes, determining WIP across project is a key step to improving focus, flow, and also value delivery, right? It's often more complex than team level WIP because it involves more than, you know, just a or a couple stakeholders. It usually involves multiple stakeholders and maybe even initiatives and systems and layers of abstraction. So one thing that I would recommend is maybe start by defining what counts as WIP at the org level. It could be like in-flight projects or initiatives. You could have epics and features that are actively being worked on, or maybe even like work with allocated resources, you know, time but not completed. So again, you know, projects that could have left the idea stage but haven't delivered value yet, right? So you may want to first start by defining what really counts as WIP. Then maybe inventory all active work, right? More along the lines of your project portfolio tools, create an inventory from all sources of truth. Then maybe try to visualize, you know, like use some of the visualization techniques like Kanban at multiple levels. You could have portfolio Kanban, you could have, you know, program level Kanban, but try and visualize WIP to make it more actionable, because once you have the data from your, you know, your columns like idea, ready, in progress, blocked, or done, whatever that is, and more from heat maps of team assignments across the projects, you can actually make that actionable, right? And then you can connect WIP to capacity. Then you can track which teams or departments are involved in, you know, how many efforts, you know, whether you have like team allocation matrix, or, you know, like you can then look at what the overload is and maybe even use team topologies to, you know, help you think about the team interaction modes and limits. And then one last thing you could also do is, you know, identify over WIP signals, right? Is there frequent context switching? Is there delays in delivery despite high activity, or lack of clarity on priorities? And maybe even like use flow metrics like cycle time and throughput and aging WIP to diagnose. And if you know, are interested, maybe we can even, you know, get some time together later to see what else I can help you with. But, you know, those are some of the things that I've tried.
All right, great. Thanks for answering that. I think that would be our last question. Meenakshi?
Thank you so much. Appreciated, Bhavani. Especially, I think your last question really helped those people who are working on a scale level and they're still in the project mode officially within their enterprises. But you know, agility is everywhere now, even though people may not call themselves or fit themselves into agile projects. So truly,
Yeah.
this was great and wonderful. Thank you. Looking forward to July. On the same kind of thread where we just ended is hybrid projects, and projects are everywhere. So come join us to listen to Alan Zucker to learn more on this topic. Thank you all. Thanks, Bhavani.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.